Welcome to Fuse, the global podcast by the PRCA. I am absolutely thrilled. Our episode today will focus on unleashing Africa's PR potential and global impact with Ayeni Adékúnlé. Now, I'm so thrilled to have you today, Ayeni. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. It's good to see you. You're looking really lovely, and I like your environment. It's beautiful.
Thank you. So I'm just going to give a short blurb on your impressive, incredible bio. So you are the founder of BHM, a Nigerian consultancy, but you have offices in the UK, and you are about to launch in the US.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is really exciting. So you're an international agency and you've used incredible platforms like World PR Day, the Africa PR Report, and Placard and NEC Live, and I think also World Influence Day. That's yours
Yes,
as well.
Global Day of Influence.
My God, you are just on it. I mean, all of this extra stuff, as well as running your agency, and it's really to bring Africa into the global discourse, whilst building out your agency at the same time. And you're the first global communication service firm in Africa. You have offices in Lagos and London and Edinburgh, Nairobi, Accra, and you've got plans to launch New York. Your clients have included Heineken, Coca-Cola, Coursera, MTN, MultiChoice, the Macallan. We're so thrilled to have you. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Farzana.
So Ayeni, I remember meeting you, with Stephen Waddington's sort of group, and I remember first thinking, who is that well-dressed man? He is incredible. He must be in fashion PR. You really have a certain style, which I massively appreciate. And then I remember after that, flicking through the FT, and then there was this whole article on the fastest growing companies in Africa, and I was like, oh, this would be interesting to read, and boom, you're there. So you're incredible what you've achieved, and your passion. So I'd love to know about your journey, from journalism to PR. If you could just talk us through, because I know you're also working in the music industry. So I'd love to know your origin story, how you came into the industry, what were you doing before, and if you can talk us through what you've done so far in our sector. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Farzana. Thanks for the opportunity for this conversation. Um, uh, I studied microbiology in university.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but before I went to uni, I'd fallen in love with music. So my career actually started with music. I was in the music industry, um, promoting artists, managing artists, working in A&R and artist development and everything. But later on, before I went to uni, I found out that I preferred writing to actual management. So I settled more for writing. So by the time I left uni, I'd become a well-versed writer. So I just faced journalism, So I moved from working in the industry, managing talent, to actually reporting, writing about music. And just at that point, the music industry in Nigeria was struggling. The markets had not opened up. There was no streaming. There was no YouTube and all of that. So the industry was very local. So I did my bit, and I really, really loved music. I loved traveling. I loved covering concerts and everything. But you see, it wasn't necessarily the most rewarding in terms of compensation. And I was very ambitious. So I was looking for what to do with my skill, what more to do with my skill. I could write. I knew about music from a pop culture perspective, also from an art perspective. I was just trying to find out what could I do, to make more money and get by. I'd left university in 2004, and I had been writing for almost God knows how many years, 10 years thereabout, but not much was happening. And then a label executive, the biggest label executive in Nigeria at the time, who I was privileged to be acquainted with, said to me, "You write so well. Why don't you become a publicist?" It was the first time I was hearing about the word. I had no idea what it was about. And I remember leaving his office that day and going back home to research what this was about. And I said to myself, this is close to what I do for free for my friends anyway. because I was already writing profiles for friends and so on and so forth. So by 2006, I decided that I wanted to be a publicist, and I didn't want to do it part time because it would conflict with my work as a journalist. So I quit journalism to go and focus on that. And we became big almost overnight. All the years of experience working in the music space, making friends with artists, covering the mobile awards in the UK, I'd met everybody. Yeah, all of that came to play when I came out to announce that I was now a publicist. So the biggest artists in the country, the biggest label were suddenly knocking on my doors. I never had to pitch for a business. I never had to ask anybody for business. So that was 2006. By 2007, 8, we were like the biggest publicist in the company. I could hire a staff, two, three, four. I could get an office and so on and so forth.
And at
But
this stage, Ayeni, were you just focusing on the music industry?
just the music industry. That was all I cared about. That was all I wanted to do. I didn't want to do corporate, was too boring. It was just working with artists. But you see, but by 2008, a couple of clients and friends started saying to me, the work you do is so good that you must consider looking at other sectors of communications. And
Mm.
I found a gentleman at the time, Professor Phil Osage, who was the head of the PR Consultants Association in Nigeria, who also said to me, you need to get a diploma in PR and become a proper PR professional so you can join the NIPR, which is the equivalent of CIPR in the UK.
Mhm.
So I did that. I went back to school. Don't forget that I came into PR, being a publicist as a journalist. I came in with a lot of arrogance, thinking I knew everything, I knew so much. But the diploma that Phil Osage caused me to take showed me that yes, I could write,
Mm.
yes, I was creative, but I didn't know the fundamentals of
Mm.
public relations and communications. So I got a diploma, I went back to class, I got that. At the same time, a couple of friends or clients were saying to me, you guys do such great work. Why don't you consider doing corporate PR and brand PR? It sounded all very boring and, to me, I didn't want that. I wanted to, but I listened. And in 2009, we rebranded. That was when the company became BHM, Black House Media. We used to be called something else, and we rebranded in 2009. And I recall that we got the opportunity to work for a company called GD Neta. They were the exclusive licensee, so to speak, of Moet NSC, Glenmorangie, Moet and Chardon, and all those wines and spirits in Nigeria at the time. And I'd met the comms lady at one event who had said, okay, let's see what could happen. We bidded for that business, and that was our first try at doing corporate work. It was still close to entertainment because they were doing Hennessy artistry and what have you. But we were now working for a proper corporate organization and who you could learn from their structure, you could see how they worked, and it was very eye opening.
Mhm.
Then I recall an interesting story where the next year after that, Viacom, which is now called Paramount, were
Yeah.
looking for a PR partner in Nigeria. Now, in my journalism year, I'd covered them and I'd been merciless. So now I'm here pitching for their business. And I recall the vice president at the time, Alex Okosi, who is now with Google, said to me, you were very, 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 very stubborn. I remember how you covered our events, and now you want our business. Right? Why should we give you our business? And I recall the answer to him. He said, I covered you as a journalist very objectively, very honestly, and very fairly. It may not have been the best way that you wanted it, but I
Mhm.
can assure you that if I were to be your PR consultant, I would also approach your work with the same honesty and dedication and fairness. And we got the business.
Yeah, that's a very good response. One thing I wanted to ask you, because you segued from journalism to PR, like a lot of our listeners, there's a number of journalists that have come into PR. Did you find you had to adjust in terms of power balance?
Absolutely. So, as a journalist, I was quite reputable and quite known. If I
Mm.
walked into an event and into a press conference, people would be careful. People would be worried, right? I was very, 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 very powerful, quote and unquote, at the time.
Mhm.
Most of the corporate companies in Nigeria at the time were leveraging youth and entertainment to push their marketing. So I was relevant. So you were relevant, you were influential, you were powerful. But all of a sudden, you're on this other side where you are taking briefs and you're trying to win new business and you're doing client service. It takes a while to adjust. It was a shock to me. Journalism also lets you be in control of your time 100%. I could stay home for 3 days and just work on my computer and not leave home as a reporter, as a journalist. And I could go out at night and hang out with artists and colleagues and not have to be up until 10 a.m. the next morning. You cross into PR, you're doing meetings and RFPs, and then the equipment you need to work as a journalist from a word processing perspective is different from what you need when you cross to PR. You are suddenly dealing with Excel and PowerPoint, and all sorts. So it takes a while to adjust, but if you are open-minded, you find that you come with very useful skill from journalism, very, very useful skill and experience and contact and network. But if you combine that with what you learn in PR, then nobody can stop you. I keep saying that journalists will do very well in PR and they know the newsroom. They know how to tell a story. So, but that's just one part of the work. If you then come into PR and you can learn strategy and you learn the business and you pay attention, if you combine the both of them, then you're unstoppable. You know, you know.
It's true. You know, two things that's quite interesting is you decided to do the diploma in PR.
Yeah.
Do you feel, because you've never worked in a PR agency before,
I
so
never stepped foot in one.
that's, I mean, I'm the same. I've never worked in a PR agency before. And I always used to think to myself, my God, it's the blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
And I always used to be absolutely fascinated to meet other agency people. And I would want to know all about their processes in detail because I felt it was this, this land that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just find out that running a PR agency, having never worked in a PR agency, did you find doing the PR diploma, coming from a journalist background, was really helpful to you? And how did you overcome setting up an agency without having the experience?
Yeah. So getting the diploma was very humbling
Hmm.
because I was already the CEO of my own company and I had to go to class every weekend and do all of that. But I learned so much that I then caused us to have a company policy to insist that all of our PR people must have a diploma in PR if they don't have a first degree in PR, because that's where you learn the theory. That's when you learn the fundamentals. And then, yes, you're in practice, you work day to day, but there's a framework that guides what we do. So, yes, I learned so much. It was very beneficial. And since then, I became unstoppable. I registered for CIPR, I started taking courses and everything, and I love it. But in terms of setting up the firm without having worked or even stepped foot in an agency before, I didn't have to overcome that barrier. It was actually a blessing. I think that what's made BHM very successful is that we designed our own way of how we think a PR company should run. We were not bogged down by the conventional wisdom. So every BHM consultant I say is a working PR agency because we make you understand every aspect of the work, because we say you must be able to advise your client from A to Z. So I found out later that a lot of agencies were structured around walls, media, research, monitoring, and I'm like, no, if I spend 1 hour with my clients, I should know enough about their business and know enough data to say, no, you can do that. So I think not knowing how PR was structured was what worked to our advantage. That's one. We were blind, we were stupid, we were very, we were novices, and it happened to. And I think that creative approach is what made the industry welcome us. So we brought a different approach to things. We said, no, we wouldn't do it like that. We would do it this way. And once it worked, it became the style. I think it was the same thing that worked for me when I was a journalist, where I didn't study journalism or mass communication. I was this microbiologist from the music industry who just came into the newsroom and said, why do we do it this way? And it only took a publisher, a boss, to give me a chance. And by the time I was leaving journalism, most of the music reporting you had were following my style. Same with PR. So I think it was a blessing that I hadn't worked in PR before. And now, which is what informs most of what we're doing now. We're doing this blind. We've not done this before. We're not walking a path that there's a template. We're not following a template. We're just saying we'd like to do this. Would the result be good? How could we do this? Most people wouldn't embark on a global expansion without a big wallet, without an acquisition, without a bank, their banker saying, "Go ahead, we're behind you." We're just saying, "Well, what could possibly go wrong? Let's do it." Same thing. And I think that that's what drove us from working on NSC to working with Paramount, where I had never tasted. I didn't know the difference between cognac and whiskey when we started working with NSC.
Yeah.
I didn't know jack about wine and spirits and alcoholic beverages. Paramount, same thing. But we went in there, we're very open minded. By the time we stopped working for NSC, I had become a connoisseur of not just the brand, but the category itself.
Mhm.
And we went on to work for a lot of other brands in that space because of that knowledge. And that story became complete in 2013, 10 years ago. The switch from entertainment to full-blown PR when Heineken's OpCo in Nigeria called us and said, "We like what you do for Hennessy. We see what you do. Come, let's try the project."
Mm.
And it was supposed to be a one-off project where we came in and just worked with them to launch a music app and all of that. And we've worked for them ever since. This is the 10th year we'll be working for Heineken in Nigeria.
That is
So,
fantastic.
and by the time Heineken gave us an opportunity to work with them, the whole it was like a stamp of credibility. Started by NSC, continued by Viacom, but once Anakin came in, we then became recognized as a proper PR company that anybody could work with, and that's when that switch, when that turn. That's what I say marked the turnaround point for us 10 years ago.
And so 10 years ago, when you then got that sort of mark of credibility, what happened next?
Everybody started calling. Everybody
Different sectors.
across sectors.
Mhm.
The phones wouldn't stop ringing. I used to wonder what it would take to get invited to RFPs. We
Yeah.
just never got invited. I didn't know. But from 2013, it just happened that we were on everybody's list. We were just on everybody's list. So we grew, our revenue grew over 1,000% between 2013 and 2015.
That's incredible.
It just grew. It
And
just grew.
how did you manage that growth? Because you had to then hire quickly, uh,
Yeah.
and you had to then also embed the culture, your innovative way of thinking. And every person is an agency, which means they've got so much more to learn. They're not the cogs in a machine that you get in other agencies. You really, you're really creating a community of thinkers. So how did you scale up so fast?
So I was hands-on. I was very hands-on. I was at work first thing in the morning, I remember, and I would sleep in the office most times or leave late. So I was mostly training everybody, making sure that we stick to the culture, making sure that there's quality control on the work that was being done, and making sure that we don't mess up the opportunity that we were getting. I was very hands-on, and I must say that we were blessed with extremely dedicated, loyal, and hardworking staff from day one. Most of my staff would join as interns, and 6 9 months down the line they're running accounts on their own. So there was no huge pool of talent to hire from outside, senior talent. They
Hmm.
wouldn't even work with us anyway because we were a startup, right? So we were just hiring young people who wanted to learn, who wanted to work. And I think that me being hands-on, me getting the right support from my colleagues made it easy for us
Yeah.
to grow. I must also say that the difference I find between my when I was practicing mostly in the music industry and the creative entertainment space and moving to work with corporates is that the corporates have this structure that also helps you grow, helps you learn and grow.
Mm.
So they have this very experienced head of communications. They have an entire floor full of brand managers and so on and so forth. So you are plugging into a system.
Mm.
So we learned a lot from working with Paramount and Heineken and GD Neta and all the clients that we today we do DSTV and MTN, we've done Coca-Cola. These guys have corporate affairs managers who have 30 years experience, who have worked in 7 countries. The template that we got from working with Viacom, BET, MTV, and so on and so forth, were the
Yeah.
things we adapted to work for other clients because MTV was an American company. They took us all over the world. We went to Europe with them. We went to America with them. They had
Hmm.
frameworks for everything. So we suddenly found business frameworks, brand management frameworks, case studies, and so on and so forth that we were smart enough to adapt. So
Yeah.
I wrote something on Twitter a few years ago that when you work with multinationals, they need you to
Hmm.
advise them on stakeholder management, to advise them on communication, to advise them on how to work with media and influencers and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
But if you're very, very smart, you also benefit a lot from them in terms of business development, in terms of business strategy, in terms of growth and scaling and so on and so forth. So for every multinational that we worked with, they were grateful to us for the work we were doing for them, but we were also grateful to them because they were exposing us now, the business, to things I would have had to go and get an MBA to
Yeah.
learn. So our company has grown, the business has grown on the back of what we've learned, what we've seen, what we've experienced from the big clients that we work for. So after a while, I realized why my friends were advising me to not just do music PR, but to
Hmm.
do corporate PR. Our transformation came on the
Yeah.
back of the work. We're suddenly seeing work in investor relations, working for clients who are quoted on the stock exchange, working
Hmm.
for clients who are in 21 countries and so on and so forth across
Yeah.
regions and everything. So I've learned so much. And once we started getting exposed to senior management and executive level clients and board level clients, the story just changed. Where I remember the first time I heard the word a bidder. And yeah, and
I had to Google it as well when I first heard it.
yeah. So you can know your PR so well,
Hmm.
or I'm sorry, if you don't understand business, you can't even help the clients beyond a certain level.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, so your offices are Lagos and Nairobi, Accra, London, Edinburgh. I'm intrigued to know, in what order did you open these offices? What were the challenges? And also, how did you keep your sanity? I mean, are you just constantly living on a plane? Obviously, with remote work and sort of remote and video calls is a lot easier.
Yeah.
Tell me about the internet. Tell me about the expansion to the other cities and the other places, countries in Africa, and then I'd love to know separately about the UK.
Yeah. So in 2014, I got quite worried about the lack of attention we were getting from Europe and America.
Hmm.
I thought people across Africa were doing so much great work, but we couldn't break in to the CIPR, to the PRCA, to
Hmm.
Holmes Report at the time, which is now Provoke Media, to PR Week, and so on and so forth. I would fly to London, to Finland, to the US to attend conferences. They would take my money. I remember attending an FT conference in 2014. They
Yeah.
would take my money, I'll come to the conferences, but then I will pitch to them
Mm.
to have somebody be on a panel or speak or to feature some research, and they will say, sorry, sorry, no, no, no. So we started getting worried that we're going to get lost in Africa if we don't do something.
Hmm.
And but we then went around to survey across Nigeria at the time to find out how much people knew about PR or PR firms. Even across our own country, there was a lot of ignorance about what PR meant. We asked very basic questions as define PR, define advertising. Most people thought PR was advertising. We did all of that. Then we surveyed the PR industry itself, and we found out that wow. So instead of fighting Provoke and PR Week and CIPR and so on and so forth, we had work to do our own first. So we hatched a plan to create awareness about the profession in Nigeria,
Hmm.
and then to then come to Europe and America and find a way to let the people here know about what was happening back in Africa.
Hmm.
So we actually did not expand into Africa first. We came into Europe first.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, so in 2020, I remember the retreat we had. The plan was to launch in the UK in 2015, and then launch in I think France also. So we had this very big, massive plan that, of course, did not happen. And then we sort of forgot about it. We launched the Nigeria PR report. The company kept growing. We're hiring hundreds of staff across the country. We were good,
Hmm.
but then COVID came in 2020, and I was stuck in Nigeria initially.
Hmm.
And I remember when they were allowing people to fly, I flew to Edinburgh to be with my family, And in August of 2020, I just couldn't sleep. I remember this night, it was 29th of August. I just couldn't sleep. Something just keeps saying to me, this is the time to set
Mm.
up in the UK. By then, my family had lived in the UK for 4 years, but I
Yeah.
still hadn't set up the business, right?
Mm.
And that night, I got up, went to my study, incorporated the business more or less. By morning, I registered BHM UK.
Wow.
By the next day, I wrote to Stephen Waddington, who I'd known from his blogs and all of that.
Yeah.
I'd written to Stephen Waddington and the gentleman that wrote the book, Trust Me, PR is There, Robert Phillips,
Mm.
right? And I was chatting with Robert and Phillips, just trying to say, guys, this is who I am. I'm setting up in the UK, and I want your advice. I want you guys to essentially hold me by the hand. We've done very well in Nigeria, but we
Hmm.
want to come to the UK not just because we think there's big business here, but we think we can help the Nigerian industry and the African market get a voice if you are here and we are closer. Robert sadly couldn't help much. He was sick at the time. He's passed on now. God rest his soul.
Mm.
Stephen was very, very, very supportive.
Yeah.
We started meeting over Zoom and it was very, very helpful. And by March of 2021, we were in business.
Incredible.
And the acceptance that we got
Hmm.
actually made me weep.
Hmm.
Everybody welcomed us with open arms. The CIPR, the PRCA, Provoke Media, PR Week, the level of, and I said to my team, we could have stayed back in Nigeria fighting and complaining. Yes, it's cost us a lot to be here, but then, so we set up the UK first. And then based on our UK promise is to actually help the clients here in the
Mm.
UK understand Africa better. And we also have so many clients in Nigeria and South Africa and Kenya and who would benefit from understanding the UK market better. So it's a bilateral proposition
Yeah.
in a
And a
way.
lot of market access consulting.
Yeah, market
Well,
access consulting. That's
yeah.
it. So, yeah, so once we were set up in the UK and we got the recognition and we were established and we hired our first staff, we knew it was time to start selling around Africa because you can't sell an Africa promise and you're just in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And then we
Because
set
it's got to
up.
be Pan Africa. That's
Yeah,
especially a lot of the multinationals.
yeah,
They want to have to manage multiple different agencies and
yeah,
what is it, 54 countries in
yeah,
Africa. They want to have
yeah,
the continent
yeah,
uh, covered.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And, where you set up so you set up in Ghana and
and then
Kenya.
we set up Ghana and Kenya, and then we're following up with Rwanda and Ethiopia and all these other Tanzania and Kubo. We set up from a regional perspective first. So we set up Ghana to support Nigeria for
Yeah.
West Africa, and we
Hmm.
set up Kenya to support East Africa. And then from next year, we're going to then go deep into each of those countries. The plan is that by 2026, we want to be in at least 50% of African countries and not through affiliations or through freelancers, be there on the ground, with boots on the ground because of the culture,
Yeah.
because we want to make sure that what we promise the clients is actually getting delivered. And part of what we're doing to fast track that is, for example, the Africa PR and Com report that we did, just to also say, until we get into these other markets, what could we do to help ourselves and everybody else know the continent better. And
When did you launch the Africa PR and Comms report?
we launched that just about a month ago.
And so was the whole thinking, was it for the audience outside of Africa to understand Africa, or was it for the internal audience in
For
Africa
both,
and the PR industry?
you couldn't even lay your hands on credible data, even within Africa on the industry, both from the agency side and from the
Yeah.
client side. So the idea, and we surveyed 29 countries,
Hmm.
right? In English and I think Portuguese and in French. And so the idea is to start something that can give us at least verifiable data. The PRCA has done some work in that regard. The CIPR has done some work in that regard. ECO has done some work in that regard. If you combine all of that, you
Hmm.
suddenly begin to understand the state of the industry. And but we did that as a way of helping even us understand Africa better to get data.
Fantastic.
We've
And,
done that on PR.
yeah.
What we're doing next now is to do sectors. We're now going to banking, going into agriculture, into
Yeah.
technology, and so on and so forth.
And what's your plan for the report? Are you going to issue this report every year, the same month? And then when you talk about you're going to do a deep dive into different sectors, are you going to release that for the next year's report, or is that going to be interim reports?
Yes. So
What's and how can people download it as well?
yeah. So the plan is for the report to come out annually,
Hmm.
but there will then be interim reports on key sectors of the market.
Okay.
I'm right on democracy, on pop culture,
Yeah.
on sports, on fashion, and so on and so forth. I mean, and so that when we go to these reports will still be presented in physical events. But the idea is when you go and speak in the US about Africa, really, what's what's the reference, right? When you
Mm.
go to Brussels, right, what's the reference? So it starts from knowing PR better, but you want to also be able to understand the business landscape. And we're doing this not just for ourselves. We make these reports available for download for free
Yeah.
because we want to encourage the growth of the industry. My vision is to be able to accelerate the African industry in such a way that it can occupy its space within the global conversation. And that cannot happen
Mm.
if we're not able to provide market access advisory, provide thought leadership, if we're not able to demonstrate
Mm.
knowledge, what everywhere I go to, I'm not being asked about how can I appear in a newspaper or get a media mention. No,
Mm.
people want intelligence, people want insight, people want perspective about what is happening on the continent. That's what we get paid for.
Yeah.
I'm right. So the proposition as we go around the world is to be able to provide knowledge and insight about the continent to anybody who's interested in having that understanding. You know,
I find it really fascinating because if someone's setting up a PR agency, like myself in London or someone in New York, we just, set up the agency, hire the staff, get the clients, and we're on it. Whereas I feel with you, you've had to really build the agency. You had to build the industry. In a way, you have to end up kind of nation building, where you have to, where things that we take for granted in countries where we have a fully developed industry. There's people like you in other countries that don't have a fully developed industry that have to basically lay down the foundations as well as run the agency, create all of the reports, are from a continent that is misunderstood, that needs to overcome so many obstacles that the mind boggles. And I also sort of think to myself that the good that you're doing for Africa is so important because I myself have worked, in Africa. I've worked for various presidents, and I always used to think to myself, it's wonderful, that I have the opportunity to work internationally and work for these African presidents. But actually, where is my counterpart based in Africa that I should be working with? Because you need the external and the internal perspective.
yeah,
And, if an external, consultant such as myself comes in with not the knowledge or the data of, the continent, then what kind of, where's the value of the comm strategy? Because, and so I used to always wonder about that. And so what you're creating is you're creating an army of storytellers that can tomorrow tell the story of these African nations. So they're not beholden to
yeah.
other parts who fly in and fly out. And, I think it's really important in the work that you're doing. And I think you are just beyond a PR agency head that's doing really well and growing, expanding. I think you're nation building, and you're really addressing the inequity of global storytelling. And the timing is perfect as Africa and Asia, these sort of balanced economic powers moving. What you're doing is so important, to you're building bridges at a time where we're living in an increasingly sort of multipolar world. So hats off to you.
Thank you, Farzana. I have a strong feeling that
Hmm.
the world needs and that the world is ready
Yeah.
for an alternative network group from Asia and from Africa. It's not even because it benefits us, because I think that it benefits Europe, it benefits America. When you talk about diversity and equality and inclusion and so on and so forth, Um, um, whether you're working for Barclays Bank or for JP Morgan or for Apple and so on and so forth. I think that these organizations and democracies and bodies will benefit from consultancies, be it in accounting and in management and in communications, who bring the perspective of 1.3 billion people and growing to the table. What currently happens is that these businesses get awarded to the big four or to the Edelmans and all the big guys in Europe and America.
Hmm.
They are then divided up and they sit in Amsterdam or in Dubai or in London, and then they get into Africa through affiliations and partnerships and so on. I think that has gone on for God knows how many decades, and
Yeah.
then you find that some of the organizations like Edelman and Ketchum have really tried to invest and expand into Africa, which is good. But
Mm.
I think that reverse expansion, I think, is credible. I want to see a homegrown agency like Red Hill from Singapore be mainstream in New York and in London and be as big and can participate in global RFPs for the biggest companies on earth. I want to see BHM from Nigeria, this company with maybe 200 people and 90% of them are people of color, black people, okay,
Mhm.
be as mainstream, okay, and be able to approach big business. And I just think that at the end of the day, when you take a look at what you're building with Cousin, what I'm doing with BHM, what we're trying to do, right? At the end of the day, my pitch is that 1.3 billion people, whether you're Facebook or you're Apple, I am not saying give your entire global business to Cousin PR or to Red Hill. I am saying that as you take a look at your global portfolio, perhaps you have a chance to say, guys, the Africa part of our business, we're going to award it to this firm that can help us provide that one. Or we want to get to a point where in our internal communications, in our in-house team, because this is not just an agency problem, right? You find that even on the in-house teams and so on and so forth, you have people advising organizations who don't have a foot on the ground perspective to the issue that they're advising on. So I've seen the work you're doing, I've seen the work Jacob is doing with Red Ale and a lot of other people. I'm in New York all the time. I'm back in New York in a few weeks, and I'm just saying that we need to put in the work. So the work we're doing with Africa PR Report, with What PR Day, and with Placard is to say we won't fold our arms and say no. Why are the businesses not coming to Africa? Why is not competition? No, we're making the right investments. We're going to invest in technology. We're going to invest in research and data, and we're going to invest in actually building our companies, not just across Africa, but also being in Europe and America in such a way. Uh, um, uh, um, and it just provides the opportunity for one person to break in. All I ask is for open-mindedness. Every room I go into it, I just say, guys, the US organizations went around the world on the back of their clients. If you study the global expansion that we speak about today, name any of the big networks, right, the entire China excursion from Europe and America went on the back of business. We don't have that. We don't have hundreds of African companies expanding into Europe and America. That's one. We also don't have banks who are saying, do you know, we'll go and acquire your next 10 companies. We're going to support you, right? Right. So you are in a point where portfolio investments, FDI, and what have you are flowing from Europe, America, and Asia into Africa. If that is happening increasingly, then perhaps it's time to pay attention and say, okay, if I really want to play in, I drive around my streets in Lagos, Microsoft is there, Facebook is there, Google is there, these guys are there. And I'm saying, if you really want to succeed, if you really, 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 really want to succeed, you want to start thinking of working directly with original consultancies from this region as opposed to giving your global business to one of these firms who then go and say, who should we partner with on ground? And then it's good. It's a good start, but the ideal point. But we're not afraid of putting in the work. My dream is to make this happen no matter what, right? So we're we are going ahead with our expansion plans. We are setting up, we're pitching for business, we're doing great work. The beauty is to succeed in spite of all the issues. But it will be easy for the entire continent if the PRCA, the CIPR, and all the clients were to understand the value that the world benefits by saying your Asia strategy is succeeding because Farzana is there and she has this knowledge and this perspective and this understanding, and you factor that in what you're doing. And you're saying, Farzana, I'm sorry, you are in how many countries again across Asia or Africa? You are in 4. We want you to be in 40 by the end of next year. What do you need? Right? Okay, because we want to work with you in 40 countries across that region. What do you need? It's happened before. It happens with US firms, it happens with UK firms, where the client is saying, this is our plan for the next 10 years. This is our roadmap. We really want to work with you. You need to get ready to be in those markets. This is what you have to do. Right. So this is what I pitch to governments in Africa. This is what I preach to clients in Africa. This is what I preach in New York. This is what I preach in London. We can't compete with Edelman for client business in New York. We have a lot to learn from Edelman and Fleischmann Hilliard and Ketchum and Ogilvy and Co. When it comes to running business for the clients and advising clients who do business in New York. But I'm sorry, I dare say that Edelman and Ketchum and Co have a lot to learn from us when it comes to advising the clients who do work across 54 African countries, 1.3 billion people. And we want an opportunity to be around the table and provide that perspective. All right. If the industry and the business community makes it easy for us, I would appreciate it. But whether they do it or not, we're on this mission and we're going to make it happen.
And I guess with having your office in the UK and your soon to be launched office in the US, that's going to make it easier, because I imagine, when people are deciding which agencies to work with in Africa, sometimes people are scared. Sometimes people are uncertain. Sometimes people need to de-risk, and they're like, "Oh, we work with Edelman here in New York. They've got an office in Ghana. Let's just work with them." And I think it's about kind of building the sense of familiarity.
Yeah.
Which you're going to do, because you'll be like, we have an office in New York, we have an office in the UK. And so that strategy that you have is really clever, because what you're really doing is you're de-risking that decision-making process, because for them it's a leap into the unknown. It's into this this continent that that they don't understand and they don't know, and holding on. And it's a little bit like why McDonald's and Starbucks does so well. People travel around the world, they go to all sorts of countries, they leave their home, I don't know, in New York, and they go to I don't know, India, and the first thing they look for is a Starbucks. Because in a climate where you're uncertain and you feel adrift, you look for certainty. And that's why the McDonald's and the Starbucks and all of that does so well, because that's what people look for. So I think having building your brand in the UK and in the US will pay dividends, and you're already doing a fantastic job. I mean, using PR, but I'm sure that the third-party endorsement that you get from the FT article really makes people go, "Oh, they've been written about by the FT." So it's layers and layers of credibility, and you're using classic PR techniques to overcome that business challenge, which is really fascinating. Now, I understand why you're doing the Africa report. I understand why you're upskilling and building talent in Africa. I understand your mission. I understand your sort of thinking of, well, if Western companies can come to Africa, why can't African companies go to the West and compete, as well? And I understand that. What I don't understand is why, with all this work that you're doing, all these offices that you're juggling, all these missions that you're driving, why then on top of that coming up with, creating 2 incredible days? You've got the Global Day of Influence and Global PR Day. What was the thinking behind creating these 2 days? And I noticed that the Global Day of Influence is November the 22nd.
Yes.
Not only is my birthday, birthday of Edward Bernays.
Edward Bernays,
Know a little bit about the Global Day of Influence. Did you anchor it to November the 22nd because you've been secretly stalking me, and it's like, or was it actually Edward Bernays, and what does he mean to you?
Thank you so much, and now I can never forget your birthday again, so that's really, really good. So we with what's going on around the world, um, if you look at Russia, Ukraine, if
Hmm.
you look at US China relations, if you come to Africa, if you see what's happening from Niger to Burkina Faso to Mali and so on, there's chaos everywhere, right? And you can see that people are benefiting from this chaos.
Yeah.
We designed the Global Day of Influence to create an opportunity to have conversations about using influence for good. People use influence for so many selfish reasons, oftentimes to actually divide people so they can manipulate them. Politicians, big business, big tobacco, big tech, and so on and so forth. So we say if we are PR people, PR is, in my mind, PR is one of the most noble professions in the world because it teaches people to be honest,
Hmm.
to be fair, to communicate with the intention of being understood. Right? PR, the ethics, and it's what drives how I live my life. The ethics. If we were able to guide our clients, our stakeholders, our principals, and so on, to even follow it at 50% level, if the presidents of all the countries of the world were to run their offices and run their countries on the back of the ethics of PR, I don't think most of the issues that we have around the world we would have it. In politics in my country, people say if somebody says good morning to you in politics, you literally should go to bed because it's most likely like 10 or 11 p.m. We've come to a point where we've accepted that politics is not a moral game. You can do anything to get into government. I'm sorry, if you get into government by all means possible, then you can't govern ethically. So we designed the Global Day of Influence as a way to teach ourselves, to remind ourselves,
Mm.
number one, to have influence. PR people are too quiet, too
Mm.
laid back. We should have the biggest profiles on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram if we are really the gatekeepers for
Mm.
professional ethics.
Yeah.
Our voices, we should be the thought leaders across sectors. So each time I open the FT or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the Times of London and I see an article disparaging PR, I'm like, well, it's not your fault. The people who should be writing about PR for all these magazines should be PR people, not somebody who doesn't doesn't even know much about the
Mm.
profession. So PR has been so demarketed,
Yeah.
so the PR, that we don't even have the influence, number one, that we should have. So for Global Day of Influence, we want to have the right influence. I want PR leaders to be respected and trusted and influential. Then we want to remind ourselves of this influence that we should hold, but also on the influence that we have on big business and big tobacco and big government and big tech, so that we can work with them to use their influence for good. Perhaps the world will get less of wars and conflict and all of that. That's the concept behind the Global Day of Influence.
Yeah, I love that because the irony is that we're in the business of reputation, but PR people and our industry suffers.
Yeah.
So we know that's such an irony that our craft is reputation, but yet, when you say people you work in PR, you almost get an eye roll.
Yeah.
And also it's, people sort of assume that, that all you do is misconstrue and twist truth. And so you often have, even in the UK where the PR industry is quite mature, you often have, news articles about how, I don't know, a local council wasted, £28,000 on PR, and it's like we're not valued, we're not understood. But how can an industry, out of all industries, be so misunderstood and so undervalued when our craft is influence and reputation? So do you feel that where we are going wrong is that we are not proactive enough in our own storytelling as individual PR practitioners, as well as an industry having a voice where, where we proactively and strategically communicate the value that we bring?
Yes. We haven't done a good job of that. The CIPR is trying their best. The PRCA is trying. PRSA is trying. NIPR in Nigeria. I think a lot of efforts are going into.
Hmm?
There are so many committees, so many people working, but not much is getting done. I think it's time
Yeah.
for PR people. There are millions of us around the world to actually
Mhm.
join in that effort. It's not going to be a battle for PRCA alone. I saw Francis, God rest his soul, carry the battle on his head, right, for so many years. It's not a job to be left for the PRCA only or for the PCA. You have so many people earning income from
Mm.
public relations, doing amazing work. Right. I use the technology industry as an example. They tell so beautiful stories of their work. The startup became so fashionable. The startup scene, right, right. The idea of raising has become so cool, and I'm like, people no longer even think you have to become profitable. So if you look at the way the tech people have sort of curated their industry, we need to be intentional about how we build influence. If we truly, truly want to have a voice and have a voice that has meaning, then we need to be in the room and we need to say and do the right things. Each time I see a journalist call out a PR person on Twitter for over pitching or for wrong pitching or for being lousy, I'm like, that's bad. But guess what? I admit that there are quack PR people, there are lousy and a lot of nuisance PR people, but there are also quack doctors. There are
Yeah.
quack lawyers. There are quack journalists. There
Mhm.
are so many journalists doing such a horrible job. But guess what? I don't paint the entire journalism practice with the brush of the few who are doing horrible stuff. Same with medicine and surgery. Same with finance. But guess what? It is also because there's so many public examples of fantastic, great journalism. There's a Pulitzer Prize awarding such. So there are so many things that showcases great journalism that
Yeah.
and they are mainstream and they are big. Same with from, but in PR we just speak to ourselves.
Mm.
So eco conferences, PRCA conferences, even the way we use Twitter
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
yeah. Even it's I'm like, no, it's time. So the investment we are making into the future, the fellowships we are creating, the scholarships we are creating, the projects we are doing, are to create, which was also why we created the word PRD. In addition to Global Day of Influence, are to create platforms and opportunities that can extend public relations reputation into the rooms where we need to have the right reputations in boards, in the finance industry, in the insurance industry, in the technology space, in the academic space, and so on and so forth. Stephen is doing a PhD, and we've always talked about this gap between theory and practice, right? So at the point where it's seen as a profession that requires, so the work we're doing next is to get to a point where you can point out terrible journalists out there, but I'm
Mhm.
sorry, you can also point out a lot of amazing journalism out there.
Yeah.
You read the story of the nurse, the nurse that was just convicted a few days ago of killing babies. But you will also read hundreds of stories of medical practitioners doing fantastic work. You will see what the NHS is doing. But in PR, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've not designed platforms and experiences and opportunities and all of that to showcase the way we are helping the world, we are helping governments, we are helping countries and industries and all of that. It's not become cool, it's not become fashionable, and it has to.
Yeah, because a lot of people ask me in my career, why did you choose PR? Why would you want to be a PR person? You know, it's just not really well respected. But I absolutely, I love PR. It's quite interesting because we often counsel our clients when there's a negative sort of reputation or negative sentiment, is to not leave a vacuum where other people control the narrative. You
Yeah,
go in control the narrative, but we've actually departed. And there are, of course, the PRCA and the CIPR and other players who are doing, a fantastic job, but they need the industry behind them.
yeah,
There's only so much they can do. And there's like people like Stephen Waddington and Sarah Waddington who, probably like you and for both of us who didn't come from a PR agency background, they put so much content out there to help people like us
yeah,
understand the industry and navigate the industry. So there's
yeah,
amazing people, but I think we obviously need more of them.
yeah.
Here in the UK, for instance, when the person outside of the industry thinks about PR, they often think about, on TV, we had this series when I was growing up, absolutely fabulous, which was about this fashion PR, and she was totally mad, and completely off her head, and alcoholic tendencies, and was high most of the time. And you got that on one extreme. On the other extreme, you've got PR represented as kind of shady political PRs who are shouting and screaming and super unethical, and kind of like a little bit Machiavellian, sort of pulling strings. So those are the sort of archetypes of PRs that we have in the sort of national conscience, and there's nobody really pushing through a positive. And we also had, unfortunately, we had some high profile sort of PR people, like, when you had Bill Pottinger, that had a very negative impact on the public perception of PR, and then Max Clifford as well, who was a celebrity PR person, and the crimes that he committed. So we have definitely, need to step up our game if we are to be taken seriously. But what I wanted to know about the Global Day of Influence on November the 22nd, apart from buying me and sending me a lovely, generous birthday present,
Absolutely.
are your plans? Like, what does it mean? What are you going to do? What do you want other people to do? Are you going to have a toolkit that we can download to help us come up with our own initiatives?
Yeah.
What's
So similar to what we do with World PR Day, the difference here is that we're considering doing a physical event in London. COVID cost us 2 or 3 years. So this year we're thinking to do a physical event in London, more like a sitting event where you actually get to sort of explain to people what this means and what we're trying to achieve with this. And then of course the toolkit, and the reason why we step back often from both events is that we don't want to own them. If you see how well what Day has done, is that we created them, we put it out there, and we stayed away just to make sure that people can take ownership. Because really, it's not for us. I want people to be proud to work in PR. I want people to ask, wait, and if you see, it's been adopted like, I, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 countries now around the world, Asia, everywhere. But because PR is very direct, what PR Day, it's easy to understand what it's about. When people ask me about global day of influence, I often have to explain that influence is not about people even confuse it with influencer marketing. I'm like, yeah, he has a role to play, right?
Yeah.
Because celebrities and influencers have a responsibility. In my country, in Nigeria, we've gotten to a point where people now advertise medicines and drugs that have not been approved by the drug body, right? And they use influencers just to bypass the. I'm like, that has an impact. I'm saying we all need to be conscious about our responsibility. The parent has an influence on the child. That's how I see PR. I see PR and comes not only as what we do for the clients, and I keep saying it needs to be taught from elementary school, right? The way you manage your stakeholders, it's not only a business that requires to understand the skill, the the church, the family unit, communities, and so on and so forth. If we don't get that right, you are going to find people who have not been trained in the right way suddenly come into the world of work, and you expect them to be able to understand that this is the way to manage relationships. So for this year, we might do a physical event. I'm waiting for some go ahead on that. But the plan is to have a toolkit and to encourage people to own it as much as they can. I think the year before, we asked people to just identify who's had the most influence on their lives and why. Just to kickstart a conversation, and people were talking about their parents and their grandparents. Somebody said it was actually their child that their child taught them how to love, right? And that just changed the kind of person that they were. So just to begin to draw attention to influence and what it means. But what I found from the research that we did was that most PR people did not consider themselves influencers. Most people who work in PR, and I'm like, no, but you have an influence over, if you work in-house, I'm sorry, you have an influence over your principal. If your agency, you are trying to sell, you are trying to get a client to think in a certain way, or to move from a certain way, or to take an action or not to take an action, you are an influencer. Right? And if you're trying to get your way into the newsroom, if you're trying to pitch content through the newsroom to an audience, you are trying to cause influence. So redefining influence to let us understand that it's not only when the Kardashian sisters or when John Legend, comes up and say, guys, I've got this new product. No, we all have influence in our different spheres. How do we want to use them? How do we choose to use them? In this case, we need to begin
Yeah.
using it for the PR profession, which we've not done. So when you step out every day, the way you conduct yourself on social media in your community, when you want to pitch to the media, when you pitch with a
Mhm.
client, do you present yourself in such a way that they say, wow, that person works in PR. PR must be a serious and noble profession. Or
Mhm.
do they think those guys must be jesters because of you? So from how you comport yourself, how you do your work, the kind of training you give yourself, the kind of knowledge that you acquire, how you carry yourself, are you adding to the positive reputation for PR because of you? That's influence. So how do we begin? By using our own medicine. That is the start point. The end point is to be able to get to a point where we can have lasting influence on democracy and on business. Two aspects that I think will determine where the world goes next. And I think we've done a very poor job of both.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I think all of us in our individual capacity, we're ambassadors.
Yeah,
And, a lot of us choose PR because we love the industry. And I think there's no greater way of showing your love than
yeah,
you know, to promote the industry that you're in, by being the best self that you can. My last question for you, Ayeni, is on the topic of influence.
yeah.
Who has made the greatest influence on you? And it could be more than one person.
Okay, I didn't see that question coming, and it was not in the treatment.
Why not?
I would, I would say, I would group them. My parents. So my parents are late. I was adopted by the Ayenis. They are both late now. My dad died in 2011. My mom died in 2004. I think that would be the biggest influence in the person I've turned out to be, in my values and principles, hard work, and so on. A typical African parent, and that would be that. I would also say that I've got a community of friends who have really, really, really influenced my approach to business, and my approach to how I live my life, my approach to family, and everything. And then I would say my immediate family, my siblings, my children, my wife. I met my wife in university, and we come from two different backgrounds. And I think just being exposed to that other side really, really just showed me what I come from. A polygamous family. My father had about 12, 13 children from 5, 6 women. So,
Wow.
so meeting my wife in school, who comes from a home where it's just herself,
Yeah.
3 siblings, a parents, and I would go to their house, and I saw for the first time a different kind of home, different to what I was used to, So,
Mm.
but I think most importantly, I would say that there's been so many people that I've never had the privilege of meeting or being acquainted with, whose works I've read, who have had tremendous influence on me. Reading opened my eyes at a very early age to the
Mm.
entire world. Before I ever got on a plane, before I ever left my bedroom, I'd been to the US, I've been to the UK, I've been everywhere. And I still try my best to just read as widely as I can. So I would say the biggest influence on me has been my parents, my friends, my family, and then the people whose work I've had the privilege of consuming.
And final cheeky question. You mentioned books. I mean, I love reading, and for me, I had a very kind of narrow exposure growing up, so I didn't know much of the world. But
Yeah,
my God, I opened a book. I travelled,
right.
uh, and I learnt so much just from reading. Are there any particular books that you'd recommend reading for our listeners? It doesn't have to be PR related. Anything across sort of self development, business, PR, marketing, media. Is there any particular authors or books that you've read that you would recommend?
Um, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to recommend a lot of African authors.
Please do.
Yeah, I'll recommend more authors on their works than specific books. So the complete works of Wole Soyinka, highly recommended. The complete works of Chinua Achebe, God bless his soul, especially Things Fall Apart, highly recommended. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, highly recommended. Um, TM Aluko, highly recommended. And then I will go to, there's a gentleman called Teju Cole, who I'm a big fan of, highly recommended. And just that's just a few. No apologies to anyone that I should include that I may have left out, but that's just a few from a very, very extensive list. But I would also say that there are people I read from here that I find very inspiring, either articles or long read. There's a gentleman called Paul Graham, who I read very, very, very well. There's a gentleman called Neville, whose
Hmm.
long reads and threads I pay attention to. There's Christensen. I've forgotten his first name now. He's dead now. Who I really, really, and he did this book in partnership with a Nigerian gentleman. The title of the book I remember is called The Prosperity Paradox. Very,
Okay.
very, very, very good book. You know, and then there's, I'm trying to remember the book that Stephen, okay, I'll stick with authors again. So when I just met Stephen Waddington, he has sent me a book by Scott Galloway. It was something about post corona. It was a very powerful book. So Scott Galloway's works extremely, extremely recommended. If you want to focus on PR and read about PR, go and buy Stephen Waddington books. The ones he did alone and the ones he co-authored with other people. There's Mark Ritson around marketing, also the works of Mark Ritson. And I learned about how to restructure how I saw my business from a book that a good friend of mine, John Ugbe, recommended to me, and it was called The Subscription Economy. So
Oh,
we never saw the business we do, retained business, and all of that as a subscription business, as guaranteed future earnings. And now you can plan your income for the next 3 years. And on the back of that, you could plan investments and expansion and talent acquisition. You could essentially plan your capital expenditure, your current expenditure, your entire business for the next 12 months. If you were to sign a 12-month contract today, it's the same thing with paying Apple a monthly subscription. So I read that book, it's by Tienzo, and it was very, very good. And
that's
I just
fascinating. I never thought of it as agency retained as a subscription, but you're absolutely spot on.
it's a subscription business. And I read that book and I got into a rabbit hole of just trying to just study about subscription businesses and why they grow so well and why they do so well. And it changed my approach, it changed my view to how I saw my business. So yeah, there's a book that I don't remember now that I really, really want to recommend, and I'm just going to pick it up. If you just give me a second, it's
Sure.
it's very controversial and it's old. By the way, I recommend. So there's a book called 12 Causes of Dishonesty. It's by Henry Ward Beecher.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah,
So
and
is it like Machiavelli's The Prince
kind of, kind of.
and 48 Laws of Power by
Yeah,
Graham? Yeah.
yeah, kind of. And the original Edward Bernays book on PR, um, I recommend it. It's called Propaganda. If
Yeah.
you read it with the knowledge of PR that you know now, a lot of the principles that would really, really, really sort of put perspective to what we do is in that book. It's an old book, very, 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 very old. Don't mind the language, but look for the original book by Edward Bernays. Very, very powerful book. Yeah, so that's just a summary of what I think I find useful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Ayeni. It's been absolutely inspiring to hear you and to hear about your journey. And I wanted to thank the audience for tuning in. And please do subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Um, what we'll try and do is also include the links to the books that Ayeni recommends, as well as also Ayeni's social media handles, which I believe your Twitter handle is Ayeni the Great.
Yeah,
Uh,
across all platforms. Yes, I agree.
yeah, I love that.
So,
And you're on Instagram as well,
yes,
Ayeni,
yes,
LinkedIn.
yes.
And then the website for the company for people who want to learn more about the company is
bhmng.uk and bhmng.com.
fantastic,
Thank you.
brilliant. Well, we have lots of other exciting episodes coming up, so please do subscribe and please do follow Ayeni. He is a incredible mover and shaker in our industry, and we are so grateful that you've taken the time out for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farzana. I had fun. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fuse. Our home online is prca.org.uk.